Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin Sinise.
And I'm Mike Poteet, and you're listening to episode 77, The Human Adventure. We'll start off with some Star Trek news.
And then we'll get into our audience feedback right after our main topic, The Human Adventure. We're going to be talking about Star Trek The Motion Picture, which just had its magnificent Director's Edition 4K re-release this past week. If you haven't seen it, check it out. This is going to be a great episode. Stick around. Well, it's a momentous day, Mike.
Kevin Unit. Why has the podcaster not disclosed the information? Oh, sorry. I wasn't feeling it myself there for a minute. How are you, Kevin?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you? Are you feeling?
I'm doing well.
Back to yourself now.
Feeling more like myself. I just have this little glowing thing on my neck. I got to see if that'll get that off. Good thing we're not a video podcast.
I'm looking forward to your probing insights. Yep. It's going to be one of those episodes, folks. It's going to be one of those episodes.
Tell you, call Joe Piscopo, somebody.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. So, well, you've managed to work an outrageous Okona reference into this episode. So I guess
the Okanaissance continues, and he hasn't even shown up on Prodigy yet. So.
Yeah, there it is, Okana. I pronounced it Okona for years, and it's Okana. But anyway.
Okona, tomato.
I didn't see the episode when it originally aired. I don't think, and so for years I just saw it in episode lists. I didn't see it for a long time. And so I said Okona for years, and that's a bad habit. Anyway, moving on. We got better Star Trek to discuss than that clunker.
We do indeed. That's for sure.
But before we get into that, we do have some Star Trek news. I believe you have done some digging and found out some things that were announced on First Contact Day. I
was going to say, I didn't have to do a whole lot of digging because this past week was... And let me be the last to wish you happy First Contact Day.
Thank you, sir. And happy First Contact Day to you, too.
Thank you. But yeah, so that was...
I think, people do like Eve and Adam, for the day before and the day after. I think we'd have to start like counting descendants to figure out what start First Contact Day Schmed or whatever this is. Anyway.
Well, we could be in First Contact Tide. Like, you have Christmas Tide.
Yes.
So Easter we could have First Contact Tide. But this past Tuesday, April 5th, was First Contact Day 2022. So we're now just 42 years? No, 2063. I don't do math. I was in English. We're 40-something years or 39 or something
41
years from actual First Contact.
41 years from actual First Contact.
All right. But in the meantime, until the Vulcans show up, we had some exciting things to talk about. The biggest reveal, in my opinion, this year was not only an announcement, but an actual trailer for season 3 of Picard, even though season 2 is not over yet.
Nice.
A brief thing, just about 90 seconds, but and I won't go into the trailer because I know you don't want to watch trailers, and
That's
I
true.
respect that. But the news that came out is all the main cast characters of TNG, minus Wesley Crusher, will be in Star Trek Picard Season 3.
Awesome.
All the actors will be back. One assumes reprising their roles from TNG, although with Brent Spiner, I don't know.
You never know.
You never know who he's going to play on Star Trek Picard these days.
Yeah.
But so that will be exciting. And I did, I've said it before on the podcast that TNG has lost some of its luster for me over the years, but still it has a special place in my heart. Mm-hmm. And I did get excited knowing the whole cast would be reunited for season 3 of Picard.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's something that really needed to happen. I'm glad it's happening. And I'm looking forward to it because, if this is going to be, the end of Jean-Luc Picard's story, then, everybody needs to be there. I think that's great. I'm excited about it. That's as it should be.
And for sure, without the Next Generation, I don't think Star Trek would be the franchise it is today.
Oh, it wouldn't.
I mean,
It wouldn't exist.
many more people were fans of TNG while it was on the air than were ever fans of the original series while it was on the air.
Right.
And, it was just really people, I think of the franchise series, it alone comes close to the level of influence of the original series because people know Picard and Data, at least, even if they've never, even if they're not fans, those characters, some of those character faces have permeated the public consciousness. And
no, you're absolutely right. TNG is so foundational, and so that makes everybody returning for Picard all that more wonderful and good. And who knows who Brent Spiner will be playing? I'm looking I'm looking forward to him playing Boris Soong, the one Soong ancestor who was just unfortunate enough to not have a name that started with A, and he until Noonian,
right.
It was yeah. Anyway, well, that's good. But you know what? There is some other interesting Star Trek news.
Yeah,
I watched a trailer.
You did not.
I did.
Where's the real Kevin, and what have you done with him? And you watched a trailer for what?
The trailer was for To the Journey, the Voyager documentary, of which I am a proud supporter.
I know you've been excited about that.
I have been. It looks great. It's all the humor and insight that you expect from not only the cast and crew of the show, but also just from this production company and the work that they did on the Deep Space Nine documentary. I think this is just going to be another great piece like that one, and something that Voyager deserves, and I'm looking forward to it very much. So,
yeah, I watched that trailer as well, and just the cast have some fabulous stories to tell, and I'm looking forward to hearing them regale us at length with what it was like to film that series and their relationship to it since then. I mean, again, it's just another example of how, for so many actors, once you're connected with Star Trek, it becomes a big part of your life.
That's right. And
as well it should.
Right. It's one of those things, like you can be involved in Star Trek for the rest of your life once you become a part of it like that. I haven't even become a part of it in that way, and I'm probably going to be dealing with it for the rest of my life.
Well, same here, but yeah.
So yeah, but I'm excited about the documentary. They didn't really announce a release date or anything, but it was great to get a preview. That was very cool.
It was a nice treat to tide people over who are excited about that. It's something, and to celebrate First Contact Day. And yeah, I thought it was a good thing to do. To as I recall, and to my shame, I still haven't watched the DS9 documentary. But as I recall, people rumbled and grumbled for a long time while that was in production because they didn't know when it was coming. And so maybe they learned that we need to just reassure people that it's on the way.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and I think the audience might have gotten more patient too in the intervening years because we saw how that turned out. So it's like, okay, we'll be all right.
Right. And it's good to know that audiences can still be patient because patience is a short commodity in our society sometimes these days.
Agreed.
Speaking of which, and rumblings and grumblings, apparently at Star Trek Mission Chicago this week, a convention that was going on, somebody got impatient or wasn't paying enough attention to what they were doing and put out posters for Strange New Worlds featuring Dr. M'Benga and Mr. Spock, but these had the characters' first names on them.
Oh, dear.
Dr. Jabilo M'Benga and Sachin Tagai Spock. So these posters were released at the Chicago convention and, hit the internet at warp speed and got tongues wagging. And at some point, representatives from Paramount Plus put out a statement saying these posters were displayed inadvertently. They said, sometimes when you work at warp speed, mistakes are made. Note the passive voice. While Spock and M'Benga do indeed have first names, they have yet to be revealed. So, okay, I've got thoughts on this.
Yes, please.
Number one, that's a really lame statement from Paramount Plus. Like, what now? They're going to change their names just to, what Spock's first name is going to be Joe now. I don't know. When it's revealed, it's actually going to be, Nathaniel Spock. I don't know. Benjamin Spock.
Oh, dear.
But secondly, who has been clamoring for Spock's first name to be established? They say this name comes from the night, they being trekmovie.com, to give credit where credit is due, that this name, Sachin Tagai Spock, comes from the 1985 novel Ishmael. Okay,
Right.
I read Ishmael by Barbara Hambly around about 1985. It was fine. It's a novel tying Star Trek into Seven Brides for Seven Brothers because Mark Leonard was in both projects. It's a really strange reach of a thing.
Yeah.
And, as I remember, it was fine. I'd never seen and still haven't seen Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. So maybe I would have appreciated it more if I had.
Right.
But, to reach back to Ishmael to get a first name for Spock, when again, it's not like he's Doctor Who. It's not like he's the Doctor. Nobody's dropping cryptic hints every so often about, if you only knew Spock's real name. There was that one line in This Side of Paradise to Layla Kalomi, Mr. Spock, you never told me your first name. You couldn't pronounce it.
Right.
I think maybe Spock might have even been joking with her, because he's still got residual spore influence, and he's, so he cracks a smile a little bit. I don't think this is a thing. Why do we need Spock to have you want to give Dr. Mbenga a first name? That's fine. They should have given Uhura and Sulu first names long before they did. So
Agreed.
I'm all for that. But who has ever really lost sleep over Spock's first name? Anyone? Not that I know of. Do you? Has this ever been an issue for anyone in the whole history of Star Trek? Aside from maybe Barbara Hambly in 1985 when she wrote Ishmael?
I'm actually a little disappointed that somebody took a stab at it, but
I know.
But leave it to the 1980s novel verse to come up with something like that, right?
Well,
and once again, it is current Star Trek drawing on literary Trek, which is a cool thing.
It is.
But at the same time,
and apparently Mbenga's name is from the novel verse as well. But,
okay, all right. But at the same time,
I just don't. Why do this?
We don't need it. You're right.
We've been calling him Spock for 56 years, and we've been fine.
You're right.
Ugh.
We don't need it. I agree. It is. Una, didn't particularly need.
Well, okay,
course,
but that's different because
that's different.
Number one was in one episode,
right?
The Cage, and so maybe it just didn't come up, and maybe they just normally do call her number one. Picard called Riker number one,
right?
Just about as much as he called him Will or Commander Riker. Fine. So, but nobody has ever had a problem not knowing Spock's first name. This just seems like a needless. I'm not going to be a hater because of it. I'm not going to boycott the show because of it. And I actually have a hypothesis, but it involves trailer stuff, so I'm not going to go into it here.
Oh,
but so I think I might know why this is an issue, and so maybe it'll play out beautifully. But I just think, I don't know. I don't care what Paramount tells me. Spock's first name in my book is always going to be Mister.
or Commander or Captain. Yeah.
Maybe, but usually
familiarly Mister. Yeah, sure. Right. Well, and this also kind of reminds me, or it has echoes of Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness, when it was somebody accidentally slipped out the information that Khan was going to be the villain. It was like, oh no, oh, Khan's not the villain, it's somebody else. It's
right.
Whatever. And which was we can talk about that fiasco, but
his own mother never calls him by his first name. Are we going to retcon Journey to Babel? Are we going to retcon Discovery, where Amanda never calls him by his first name? Star Trek 3, I'm Sarek, child of Scone, child of Solkar. He doesn't say I'm Larry Sarek. This is just I don't understand why they feel a need to give Spock a canonical first name.
Right. Agreed.
It's like, whatever. They didn't ask me.
I think it's just and even just that line in the episode, you couldn't pronounce it. I've never really liked that anyway, because I don't see anything in the Vulcan language or in Vulcan pronunciation or in Vulcan physiology that would give them the ability to make sounds that we can't pronounce as humans. None of that makes any sense. So, yeah, and
Well, it
he
might
doesn't need
not
a
be.
first name. He can be a
Maybe there's
standalone
something.
name. Everybody else
Maybe
in
there's
Vulcan.
something. I mentioned Doctor Who earlier. It turns out that the only time in that version of the continuity, whatever, that Time Lords reveal their name is at their wedding, and so only very few people know their actual names. So maybe he meant you couldn't pronounce it because we wouldn't be in the right relationship to each other, or maybe it goes along with Vulcan's mental stuff, like it's only a mentally pronounced first, it's with mind meld stuff. I don't know. I mean, I guess I could see why somebody could be drawn to play with it, but I don't know. It just seems like maybe I'm just being grumpy old fan today. Who knows?
That's okay. I was grumpy old fan last episode, so it's all good. It's your turn.
We can all be grumpy old fans as long as we don't become grumpy old haters. That's
right,
the line.
Right. Exactly.
I'm still very excited about that show.
I am too. I'm looking forward to it.
Can't wait. Less than a month away now as we record.
Yep. I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great. Well, there's one other thing that we should say before we exit the news segment, which is that Star Trek, once again, in the storied career of this science fiction franchise that has told such dramatic, incredible stories as Measure of a Man and Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, has once again, one of its episodes has been nominated for a Hugo Award, which of course recognizes the greatest science fiction writing.
Yeah.
And of course, the series that has won or that has been nominated for the Hugo Award is Lower Decks.
Yeah.
Take that, people who are hating on Lower Decks. The episode
which episode garnered
the episode which
honor?
we liked quite a lot, which was Wedge Dooge.
Ah, yes.
Which I think we're probably mispronouncing, but nonetheless, 3 ships, great episode.
We saw Wedge Dooge come sailing in on Hugo Day.
Yes. So that's
a darn good episode, though. I mean,
it has.
As we talked about, as I recall, you and David and I, there's a lot going on in that 22 minutes.
Yes, there is.
It works on lots of levels. So
it's a really well written episode. It's one of the best episodes of the series. So I'm glad it's getting some recognition. So,
and the great thing about the Hugos is, unlike some other awards, it's not the nominees are not decided on by professionals. They're decided on by professionals and fans and readers and anybody and viewers. They're decided on by the people who are members of the science fiction convention where the awards will be presented that year. So anybody who buys a membership in that year's World Science Fiction Convention can nominate and vote on the Hugos. I did it myself in 2001.
Oh, wow.
Because the Worldcon was here in Philadelphia.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, and it was it was really neat and of course it was before the internet had quite taken as firm a hold on all of us as it has today. But so I got my paper ballot to fill out my nominations, and then the list came out, and I read the books, and so I could go to the award ceremony knowing a little bit about each one, and it's a lot of fun. So it's neat that fans of science fiction are ones who got Wedge Dooge into that nominated slot.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's enviable experience, by the way, first of all, but then also
it was pretty neat.
Yeah, that's pretty great. It's interesting that it's nominated alongside episodes of The Wheel of Time, For All Mankind, Arcane, The Expanse, and Loki. And what's interesting about it is the category in which it is nominated is Best Dramatic Presentation Short Form.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to me too, because you think, oh well, it's in an animated comedy episode, category or something like that. Nope. Best Dramatic Presentation Short Form, and it's up against some serious TV series. Not that Lower Decks isn't a serious show. I mean, it's certainly well made and executed, seriously, even though it's funny.
Yeah.
It's a comedy,
Well,
but
we've said on any number of occasions that there's deep thinking going on in that show, and
yes,
you're
there
laughing
is.
so hard sometimes you don't appreciate it. But
Right,
until upon reflection.
right.
But and
Until you
that
listen to
Wage
our
douche,
show.
right, right. But Wage douche, as I recall, is one with those three different ships and three different cultures represented, where there's a lot of serious thinking that went into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I don't subscribe to Apple TV Plus. Life and money only allow for so many streaming services.
Right.
But I know For All Mankind has gotten lots of good reviews and is, I believe, helmed by Ronald D. Moore.
Yes.
So it's Wage douche is competing against someone in the Star Trek family.
Yes. Well, they're also the episode of The Expanse, Nemesis Games, was co-written by Naren Shankar.
Oh, well, yes, another name familiar to Trek fans. Sure.
Yeah. So there's some other Trek people in the mix there too.
So it's neat that even in and out of the franchise, Trek people are still crafting some of the best that's out there.
That's right. That's pretty cool. Well, speaking of some of the best, we have one of the best, I think, to talk about this episode. Some people think of it as the worst of the worst, but I wholeheartedly disagree with them. Star Trek, the motion picture, we have in the past week seen it again. I think we can say for the first time.
Yeah.
I
did something I've never done. I've done something I've only done twice in my years as a Star Trek fan, is watch the motion picture in one sitting. Honestly.
Wow.
I've always enjoyed it. I've never been somebody who hates on it.
Right.
But I've always watched it in chunks because it is a long movie. Although I guess this edition, is 2 hours and 15 minutes, I think?
16, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, and to be honest, it does feel like it felt longer than that to me last night. But I wanted to watch it in one sitting just to see how it might hit me, because usually I'll watch it up until they transmit their message and the V'ger glowy thingy goes away and they make the decision to press on, and that's where it feels like an act break in a play, like this sort of play. Act one would end there, so I usually pause it there and come back later, or I'll just over the years, I've, for whatever reason, only watched it generally in largish chunks. But I wanted to watch the remastered director's edition in one sitting. I wanted to have my headphones on so I could revel in the new sound mix that everybody. That's the thing I've seen people talking about as much as, if not more than, the visuals, which are glorious in the high definition. The sound has been really remastered and it sounds fabulous.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, just what a treat to see this movie get such loving care and such a wonderful presentation. Of course, the director's edition, when it came out on DVD in 2001, was what pushed me to get a DVD player. And now I've got a 4K player waiting for the physical media of this edition when it comes out later this year. Because because I did enjoy the streaming is great and all, but the first night there were some issues with the picture flowing smoothly, and the second night I kept because the first time I watched it in 2 nights, so I've seen it twice this week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and then the second night I watched, there was some popping in the audio. That when I watched it all in one sitting, neither of those problems happened. But it did make me think there's still a place for physical media where you don't have to worry about such things.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a beautiful version of the film to watch, and I just was very excited.
It's gorgeous. I really enjoyed seeing it. I enjoyed feeling like, the film is really complete, and in so many ways. We talked before about how, this film has really been unfinished for a long time.
Yeah.
And even when the original director's edition was done, it still you know, honestly wasn't complete because it wasn't, it wasn't up to the resolution it needed to be to really be able to be carried forward into new media,
Right.
which is something that I think people weren't really thinking about, 20 years ago.
Sure.
And so the fact that that's been done now, and again, with such attention to detail and with such care and respect, I think a lot of people who don't like this film, I mean, maybe they are judging it on the theatrical cut. A good friend of mine who I watched the film with says that their least favorite Star Trek movie, the one that they just really can't watch, is the theatrical cut of the motion picture.
Mm.
But their favorite Star Trek movie is the director's cut of the motion picture. and it can make that much difference. And it like you said, with the audio and the score and everything being done finally as well as it was intended to be done, it's just glorious to watch. And the restoration has been done with such care, so that even though there are things in there that, as I'm watching it, we're watching this go along, we just go, oh my gosh, like that's new, whoa,
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. Oh my gosh, that sort of thing, that just like as a nerd, you see it and because you've seen this film several times, that this is new material, or this has been updated, the shot of the V'ger railgun, sort of thing.
Right.
Is totally, is so much brighter, and the colors are so much brighter, and you get that shot of the Enterprise sort of turning around that we didn't have before inside.
Yes,
yeah.
That was something I noticed on my second viewing, the one sitting viewing. Like, wow, I missed that entirely. Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff that was finally finished, that we hadn't even seen before, and things that were done in updated ways. But if you hadn't seen the film before, you would be hard pressed to know where the new stuff was.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's done so seamlessly, and with such great respect for the bounds of technology at the time that the film was made, right? So that we're not doing things that are dramatically greater than what could be accomplished at the time. They could have been accomplished at the time. And I love it. I was commenting to my friend too that, you see some of these composite shots, where there's so many things layered, right? And of course it was all done optically. There's that beautiful moment where the shuttle that is carrying Kirk and Scotty passes by the hull of the Enterprise, and the shuttle's composited in, but it goes through this spotlight, and you see the spotlight go onto the shuttle and off, and there's all this reactive lighting and stuff, which is very hard to do in those optical composites that's there. But you also get some of those matte lines that are not quite perfect. There's a little flicker in them. There's a little black. And so they didn't go in and like clean it up to a degree that it just wouldn't have looked like that in 1979.
Right.
The rough edges are still there, but those rough edges are so clean.
Yeah.
If you get what I mean. That it just feels like a seamless whole. And that's something I think that the film hasn't felt like until the director's edition, in 2000, and then particularly now, that everything is all at the same level and all so beautifully seamless. It really feels like a complete picture at this point.
Yes, I agree. It feels complete. And that was one reason I wanted to make one of my viewings this week in one sitting go.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring so much knowledge of this movie to it from all my decades of having seen it, even in bits and pieces. I know how they all fit together. Although I will say, at this point, I think the movie that exists in my head is maybe a mishmash of the theatrical cut and the ABC TV cut
Oh
and
yeah.
the first director's edition,
Uh-huh.
because I know there are moments that are no longer there that I clearly remember.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been reading this book called Return to Tomorrow, which is
Oh
about
yes.
an oral history of the filming of TMP. You know that one?
Uh-huh. Yes, I do.
Yeah. And I was reading just last night Stephen Collins talking about a line he has, "We all make God in our own image." That is not in the director's edition, but I know I've seen that scene. And I don't know where it comes in the movie exactly. I was trying to find out, but so that's just one example. Also, some nitpicky things like that I don't know when they fixed. I guess they must have fixed this in 2001, but maybe not. I haven't gone back to my DVD to look. But the very last shot of the film,
Yes.
you know where I'm going. The armbands.
Yes.
The armbands.
That's
they're correct now. They're correct now. I don't know when they were corrected, if they were 2001 or not till this year, but
that is new to this edition. And
well, finally, it's about time.
Yeah, those of you who don't know what we're talking about, in those EV suits, or those, I guess, whatever they are, the jackets.
Well, the field jackets.
The field jackets,
Yeah.
that they wear when they go out to see V'ger. They have little armbands for their ranks, I guess, and for their ranks. And Spock has an orange one, and then McCoy's is blue. But in the last shot, for some reason, their jackets got switched.
Yeah.
And so McCoy's been wearing Spock's jacket, and Spock's been wearing McCoy's jacket for 40 years. And finally, Darren Doctorman switched the colors so that they're sorted. And I got to tell you, my friend who I watched this with is intensely nerdy about this film and knows so much about it. And we were watching the final scene, and they just went, "He fixed it! He fixed it!"
I know.
The thing that
but after 40 years of seeing it the other way, now it feels wrong.
The thing, oh, that's funny.
Even though it's right.
The thing we had the biggest moment about, of all the stuff that we saw in this film that was so cool, the thing we had the biggest nerdy explosion about was the armbands. We were like, "Yay!" It was pretty great.
I liked the new version of the approach to Starfleet headquarters. It's
oh yeah.
I mean, they redid it for 2001, but it's different now, and there's even a little star date caption at the bottom of the screen now, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And those the gold font they put the title credits in.
Oh yeah,
they
the
sparkle
sparkly
now.
That was interesting. I was like, "Oh wow, we're getting fancy, aren't we?"
But
my goodness.
But I was going to say, I bring so much previous experience and reactions to this film. I wanted to sit down with it and watch it in one go to say, what would I get out of this just as a movie, not as a Star Trek movie, but what would I come away thinking is the argument this movie makes about whatever.
Right.
And I don't know for sure yet, even though I had this intention of, turn off as much previous knowledge as I can. I can't at this point. I'm so close to Star Trek. But I think it's something to do with our relationship to technology and what makes that proper and what doesn't. Like, for example, one thing that struck me, a little thing in the scheme of things, but we start this movie with a ship that looks beautiful on the outside, but inside it's chaos, right? Our first shot of the bridge is nothing's working. Everybody's scrambling to get things working.
Right.
It's just technological chaos all over the place. And then the transporter breaks down.
Right.
And yet a few minutes later, Kirk and Rand are kind of tee-heeing about McCoy not wanting to get into the transporter, but two people just died in the transporter. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me at all.
No, it doesn't.
I'm right there. Why are you, talk about previous knowledge influencing you. Oh, McCoy's always that way. But my God, two people. And it looks a little more horrific in this 4K version. I mean, and that's that scene where those two people die. One is Vulcan, but it dehumanizes them literally. Starfleet, do you have them, quote, what we got back didn't live long. So, and maybe I'm spinning too much into this, but what we got back, it's not human. It's I think Ruth could speak to this because she wrote a review of the novel recently. But I think the novel describes them as like a claw reaching up out of this lump of flesh, and the novel's really graphic, more so than the movie. But so we've got this scene where technology goes awry and literally dehumanizes two people. It kills them.
Right.
And then the rest of the movie, there's all this, and again, reading Return to Tomorrow, there's page after page after page of the technical stuff they did to make this movie look as good as it does, and it's all very impressive. The craftsmanship that went into this film is amazing, and some of it that didn't even show up on screen. They went so far above and beyond to make this movie.
Right.
But so there's so much emphasis on the tech and the machinery, and the director's edition restores some of the character moments and all, but I think by and large, the crew still talks much more technically than they ever did on the original series.
Yeah.
Orders about how we're going to navigate to a parallel course and bring us to 1,000 kilometers. That. I mean, there's a lot of, it's not technobabble. It all makes sense. It's all coherent, but it's technical. And I don't remember that level of technicality usually in the original series.
No.
So this movie has a very heavy emphasis on technology and how do we navigate our relation. I think maybe the movie's trying to make an argument about how do we navigate our relationship to technology. And maybe that's obvious to everybody else, but it hit me in a new way, just trying to not nerd out all the time about, oh, look at the old style shuttlecraft over there and that kind of thing.
Right.
Trying to pay attention to what this movie on its own is saying about things.
Yeah, and you're right to point that out. I think our relationship to technology, of course, is underlying all of Star Trek, but it does come in this film in quite a pronounced way and in quite a profound way. I'm thinking about the way the original series dealt with artificial life forms, like with Dr. Corby, where you can create an android that looks and sounds and behaves so much like a human that you think they're a human, right? But then they reach the limits of their programming, and they can't quite process emotions or something like that, and they break down, and particularly that story, What Are Little Girls Made Of, very much shows that trying to create these things that replicate life is not a worthy endeavor, right? And because they're false. It's a false way to try to preserve ourselves, and it's going to break down and in its ability to actually be human. And yet you have in this story, you have the Ilea probe here that people look at and say, oh, this is a machine. They say that right away, that this is a mechanical device. And yet, they talk about how perfectly V'ger replicated Ilea to the point that her memories might still be in there. And in a sense, herself or her soul might still be in there. And as the story progresses, we do get the sense that Ilea is in there somewhere. And that's why Decker wants to join with V'ger, in no small part to join with Ilea. So it's interesting to see how the same franchise can almost say two different things about technology, and what changes, right? Is it that we are trying to sort of unnaturally force our humanity into something synthetic? Like in this episode, or like in the Schizoid Man in Next Generation? Or is it that our humanity emerges from the technology we create, like here and like in, say, Data's arc, right, in the Next Generation as well? Is there something to that? I'm not sure, but it is interesting that I think Ilea has to come through there, because like you said, it does reflects something about our relationship to technology, but it's spoken very much of the relationship between a created being and their creator. And so I feel like Aaliyah's personality has to come through narratively because we need there to be this joining between V'ger and the creator. We need the created being to join with the creator to make something new, to advance into this new way of life. And we have to give that a human or an emotional pull, right? For that to be something that
Right.
can reflect something that is greater, us moving towards something that is greater than ourselves.
Mm-hmm. To muddy the waters further, before we move towards some clarity, I think all the questions you're raising are maybe not muddied, but enriched and made more complicated by the fact that V'ger, of course, turns out to be originally our creation, one
Right.
of the Voyager probes. We never got as high as 6 in the real world, or we haven't yet.
Right.
But I make jokes every time the news says one of the Voyager probes has left the solar system. Like, okay, we'll see you in a few centuries as V'ger. But so V'ger, the Voyager probe, was a human creation, and then went through a black hole and emerged at a planet of machines. It's unclear how that came about exactly.
Right.
But they then, in turn, had obviously some, at the least, restorative and at the most creative capability to, well, they say in the movie, they built this whole thing to send the Voyager probe back.
Right.
To fulfill its programming. So the creation they built, the ship V'ger, is so advanced it appears organic in lots of places. Reading in this book, as well as the coffee table book that came out last year about the art of the motion picture, they reference Alien and the kind of biomechanoid stuff that Geiger came up with for that movie. They say that was an influence on V'ger. I think the trip through V'ger, I can tell sometimes where they've sped it up in the director's edition, and I can hear some cuts in the music because I've listened to the CD so many times. I know what the full cue is supposed to sound like, so I can tell they've done a pretty good job making it still smooth, and they speed up the initial approach into V'ger quite a bit. I think the V'ger flyover part is about the same length. But anyway, part of the reason those sequences, as long as they are compelling, is not just because all the special effects money is up there on the screen, but there is something weirdly biological and organic about all that. I would say there's something sexual about all that imagery. I mean,
yes.
Even in the dialogue that talks about orifices and penetrating the cloud. And I mean, and I'm not trying to be flip, and I'm not the only one who's noticed this either. There's really, I mean, heck, at one scene, they fly over things that look for all the world like big fertilized eggs,
right?
In the uterus. So there's something very biological about V'ger, even though that whole ship is a machine. So again, and we've talked about this in connection with Measure of a Man, and you've mentioned some other stories too, that the line between biological machine and non-biological machine becomes fuzzy, and and one other piece, what's the relationship between technology and sentience? It's in the final scene of the movie. Things are wrapping up to their conclusion, so they can't get into too much detail. But on the journey back, it amassed so much knowledge, it achieved consciousness itself. And yet at the same time, Spock has just told us a few, 20 minutes or so before, logic and knowledge are not enough. So what's the relationship between knowledge and sentience, and how does that tie into technology? And, why is V'ger's technology so seemingly, V'ger can create this machine, a Xylea probe that right down to eye moisture is almost indistinguishable from a biological life form, a carbon-based unit. There's just lots of layers, and I'm not sure whether it's whether it all it feels like at the end of the movie it's all cohered. Once I go back and look at pieces in isolation, I start to have my doubts, but I decide, well, the movie pulled it off somehow satisfactorily enough. So I don't know. I've said a lot. I'll let you chime in, but
well, it's something ineffable, right? That V'ger needs.
Yeah.
It's something of the soulishness of humanity. Kirk says that what V'ger needs in order to evolve is a human quality, our capacity to leap beyond logic. And in other words, V'ger needs faith. V'ger needs a sense that there is something more to the universe, and there is something more to itself than just those components. As complex and lifelike as they are on a certain level, there's also a simplicity to V'ger. We talk about V'ger being a child, and V'ger's words through the probe are simple and straightforward. V'ger and the creator will become one. Who is the creator? The creator is that which created V'ger.
Yeah.
Who is V'ger? Yeah. V'ger is that which seeks the creator, right? Right? But at the same time, that's so, even though it's simple, it's not without its complex meaning. Because we ourselves are defined by our desire to know our creator. And we are defined by that quest. We are as philosophers have said, homo religiosus, the religious human. That we quest for meaning, higher meaning, and higher power. As Decker says, as Spock says, it only knows that it needs, but like so many of us, it does not know what. And that sense that Spock refers to of, is this all there is? Is this all I am? Is there nothing more? And even when McCoy asks, what more is there than the universe? Decker still, I think, has a hard time articulating what else that might be. Other dimensions, higher planes of existence, and Spock talks about how that can't be proven logically. The existence of those things can't be proven logically. Even though, of course, we've been to other dimensions, so I'm not sure entirely what Spock's talking about there. But there is something, so there is something, we are talking about other dimensions, perhaps in a sense to which we haven't traveled, in Star Trek stories. That sense that in Star Trek 3, when Kirk is talking with Admiral Morrow, and saying, look, I here, I want to go on a quest for my friend's soul.
Right.
I know that sounds crazy because we're scientific around here. But if there's even a chance, I've got to try. You don't have to believe. I'm not sure I believe. But if there's even a chance, I've got to try. And it's that same sort of thing here. It's a leap of faith that the Ilea probe is making, that V'ger can join with the creator somehow. We don't even really know how. I don't think the movie really knows. I don't think the movie really knows how.
But it's pretty to look at.
It's pretty to look at. It just kind of happens. But there is that sense of joining. There is that sense of intimacy and connection, right?
Yeah.
And that our connections, it does, as you say, there is a sort of a sexual aspect to the Enterprise going into V'ger, and that's not to be crass. And that's
right. No, absolutely.
That's a part of our humanity, and it's a beautiful part of our humanity. But it has to do with our intimacy with one another. There's an imagery almost of Adam and Eve, really, which is, of course, Edenic imagery is big in original crew stories, right? From the Cage forward, we have talked about Adam and Eve. We've talked about Eden, and And so there's that kind of Edenic imagery of humans, for all we see, right? Because Deltans look very much like humans,
Right.
And the Aliyah probe looks very much like a Deltan.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming together, right, in a physical way, but it's about a spiritual union. It's about something greater than merely that.
Yes, and it's not just their union; it's their union with V'ger, because it's a community of three, right?
Oh,
The Aliyah
true.
probe is V'ger to an extent,
Mm-hmm.
commander, or Decker says doctor in another form. That thing killed Aliyah, but yet she has her own separate existence, and as you said, Aliyah seems to be in there somehow, somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Decker joining with the probe and with V'ger in this, and that's, I'm not so much going for the Trinity here as that's how the Eden relationship was supposed to be. Adam and Eve in communion with each other and with God, not as opposed to hiding from God.
Right.
And not that V'ger is God, but certainly V'ger has a godlike scale and power compared to humanity by the time it comes back home.
Yeah, which is interesting because humankind takes the God role. Humankind is the creator.
We are the creator.
Yeah, we are
Only
the
creator could do this. Yeah.
And V'ger is seeking its God, and that's us. So the human and the divine again are sort of conflated in a Star Trek story, which is very much within the scope of Gene Roddenberry's theology, right?
Right.
And so, but of course, that's very much within the scope of our theology too, because we believe in God being incarnated in Jesus.
Well, yes, although I wouldn't use the word conflation for our theology, because without that distinction, things become very, I think it's true of the V'ger thing, because it's all quite fuzzy at the end there.
Right.
But
the merging, right? Because Jesus is both fully human and fully divine, right? He's not half one and half the other. So,
that's right.
So it's not saying that, it's just that
there is a kind of union, hypostatic union between humanity and machine in whatever V'ger evolves to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a kind of unity to a union, a joining that is a part of the Christian worldview, part of Christian theology, not just that the human and the divine come together in Christ, but that the human and the divine ultimately are in full communion. That is the ultimate goal. That's what shalom is.
Yes.
And the wholeness, the completion.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting, and I've also always found it interesting that we don't really know, as we get closer to the climax, we don't really know how to depict this in the film.
Yeah.
All we can really do is have it kind of go kablooey, and the Enterprise show up, and it all just kind of goes into light, because we just don't know how to communicate that, how to translate it. It seems that it moves into a realm that is something maybe beyond what we can see, beyond what we can perceive. We witnessed a birth, McCoy says, but or Spock says, but a birth of what and into what? We don't really know, and we aren't really privy, but it seems to move beyond our realm of existence or our dimension of existence. And that's fascinating.
Well, it's certainly true to our experience of the holy, right? Ultimately, the holy is about not being able to perceive or you can't contain the holy, So in what I was reading this week, it was very apparent that some of these choices were just practical limitations.
Yes.
How do you show the birth of a new dimensional form of life on this? But it works out because I don't think they could have done any better than to have it all go kablooey and light, as you say.
Yes.
It's a beautiful that sequence of the joining of Decker and the probe and the Voyager probe. That's maybe my favorite, even above the tour of the Enterprise. It's just such a gorgeous moment of visuals and the music and kind of the sense of wonder of it all.
Yeah.
And it all takes place in this setting, which is, even the production designers talk about, this is like this altar where the Voyager probe has ended up. It's a shrine. They use the word cathedral to describe the passage through the cloud and through the machine V'ger.
Oh, wow.
It's just even at the production design level, who knows what any of those people believed religiously, but
Right.
they brought the sense of this is an awe-inspiring religious kind of pilgrimage and setting the Enterprises in. So
Yeah.
it's interesting because Leonard Nimoy, he says in Return to Tomorrow, he was kind of dissatisfied with the way Spock's story played out on screen, because for him it was always more about being in and out of touch with V'ger and not being able to trust Spock until the very end that he thought came across in the finished movie, and not so much about emotionless Spock learning to become emotional, which is how I've always taken it and how most fans I've talked to have always taken it.
Yeah.
See, Spock's so cool in Star Trek 2 because he went through his experience with V'ger, but apparently Leonard Nimoy said that scene in sickbay after the Spock walk,
Yes.
where he says, I should have known. What Nimoy's thinking is that he should have known V'ger wouldn't have the answers that Spock was looking for.
Oh.
He says that it's kind of like, you've been given a riddle and you go search for the High Master up in the mountains and you ask him to define it. And he says, well, I don't know. Do you? That's how Nimoy thought of it. And he said, and these are almost his exact words, I'd have to pull out the book, but he says, what he thinks the story is about is that the search is ultimately irrelevant, which is kind of strange for anybody connected with a Star Trek production to be saying. And so maybe I'm not quite understanding what he's saying, but
right.
And maybe there's something more about just the act of asking the questions and the act of searching, and maybe that's encouraging in a way that, to circle back to what we're saying about the holy, we don't always get everything neatly tied up in a bow. We don't always get something we can articulate or understand fully, but
Right.
By having quested after it, I think Roddenberry might say that the journey is its own reward, and I think Christianity can say that to a degree. I think, my faith, even if I can't ever fully articulate or understand God is there. It's not just me creating God out of my own asking and questioning and searching.
Right.
I don't know, but I think it just goes to show how the movie is, as it stands, or as it stood even before the director's edition, is so open to interpretation. And it's richer for that. It's I think it probably speaks on the most levels of any of the Star Trek movies, and whether or not it all coheres perfectly ultimately maybe isn't the point.
Right. Well, I think it's, you brought out so many beautiful things there, and talking about the idea of altars and cathedrals, and that there is a sense of a spiritual quest, that there's a sacred journey that's going on. And that's really what's going on in all of Star Trek. All of Star Trek really is about that quest for something more, for something greater to our existence. And it's interesting that climax, and again, as you said, for practical reasons, which, how do you show this, transcended, space? Well, obviously it's a giant koala. We all know that. But, but
what does he see? What does he know?
But at the same time, as often happens in Star Trek, we come up against a practical limitation, and so we make a choice. And that choice serves the story symbolically in ways that another choice might not. And it's helpful, I think, that we don't see something more.
Yeah.
That in that burst of light that is, the reaching of this pinnacle, which is the sort of elevation of humanity to a divine status in both a metaphorical and, for all practical purposes, a literal sense.
Yeah.
we see emerging from that light the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And we always come back to that. That's what the beginning of the movie is about, with that extra long sequence of the shuttle approaching the Enterprise. It's all about Kirk being restored to the Enterprise that he hasn't seen in years, that is new again, that is renewed and yet familiar, to him, at least on the outside. And and there's that longing and that love and that being joined with, your calling again. And Star Trek keeps doing that, particularly in the original crew movies, returning us to our calling, returning us to our Enterprise, so that, we can talk about what comes after this. We can talk about how we're going to have union with God. We can talk about, what happens after we die, what happens after God gets everything God wants at the end of all history and at the time of Shalom. But really, we are constantly put back at our quest. We're constantly put back at the journey. We're constantly put back at the calling, not to have the apocalypto, not to have the revelation of everything fully to us, but to know that there's something on the other side of that veil, and that we keep questing and we keep going forward, because doing the quest and doing the journey is a part of the articulation, a part of the living out and the existing of that divine whatever in our existence now. And if we miss out on that, then we miss everything, And if Decker hadn't had the human experience that he had, we talked at the end of the film. Kirk is saying, I think we gave V'ger the ability to create its own sense of purpose out of our own human weaknesses and the drive that compels us to overcome them. And McCoy saying, and a lot of foolish emotions, right, Mr. Spock? Quite true, Doctor. Unfortunately, it will have to deal with them as well. But that those emotions and that drive that compels us, and even our weaknesses, that human experience is what makes us capable of doing this big thing. And that's always true, that the story of the God's story isn't just about the divine, isn't just about God. The gospel isn't just this, lofty religious, spiritual thing. It's a very human thing. And the human story is bound up in that, with all of our weaknesses and all of our failings and all of our struggles, because without that, we wouldn't be who we're created to be, and we wouldn't get to where we're created to go. That's why the human adventure, as the end of the film says, is just beginning. Even though we've been at this a long time, even though it seems like in the end of the movie we've reached some pinnacle, the human adventure is just beginning. We still have a long way to go.
Yeah, I like how you framed it as Kirk's calling, because otherwise the beauty shots going around the ship, if his longing is just for the ship, that's a little weird,
right? Yeah,
and a little contrary to Star Trek, because Star Trek's about people. I mean, yeah, the Enterprise is a cool ship, but it's tied up with, as Kirk tells Decker, my familiarity with the ship or crew. I mean, I guess one could quibble about how many of these people were on the 5-year mission, blah, blah, blah. But his point is, I think it's said more clearly in Star Trek 2, where Spock tells him command of a starship is your first best destiny.
Yes.
And it's interesting to compare Kirk's journey from trying to do something else in both movies to getting back to what he's supposed to be doing.
Right. Which keeps happening within these 4 movies, these first 4 movies, and at the end of 4, Kirk is restored to his Enterprise. He's reduced in rank to captain. That's his discipline, but it's also his reward. But even in this movie, You see, even though he's become an admiral, when he walks on the bridge,
Yeah.
people call him captain. You know, there's very much the sense that captaincy is really where Kirk lives, where he comes alive, where he has his full being.
Right.
I talk about in the book in Star Trek 3 when he's stealing the Enterprise. You know, the other captain says to him, "Kirk, if you do this, you'll never sit in the captain's chair again." Well, he's an admiral, right? Right, but it's very clear what he actually loves.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, our loves are there for a purpose, and they need to be ordered for sure,
Mm-hmm.
so that we don't just go off after whatever, but or go off in a negative place. We have to align ourselves with the love of God and the story that God is telling, that we're a part of, that we get to live into. But our loves, the desires of our hearts, are there to help us become who we're meant to be. And I think Star Trek discusses that here as much as anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think that those two places in the movie early on where Kirk says of others, "I need them." You know, he says to McCoy, "I need you badly."
Yeah.
And then after McCoy's made some wisecrack in the officers' lounge, he says, "We need him. I need him," talking of Spock. So, and of course, Spock's line, my presence is to our mutual advantage. But yeah, it's, I think maybe that's where the movie is saying that the technology isn't enough, or one of many places.
Yeah.
Where it's about because Kirk, even were he just captain of the Enterprise again, he wouldn't be who he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be part of that triumvirate, part of that community. And there was a commentary that came out to this movie after the director's edition, but around the same time, like a few years later, there was another commentary track put out, and I forget who was on it. It wasn't stars, it was production people, but they pointed out something to me I never noticed, and now I can't not notice it, is how many images and moments there are in this film of people almost connecting but not quite.
Oh yeah.
Where there's, Kirk puts out his hand to McCoy and McCoy doesn't take it. Eventually they shake hands, but it's awkward and it takes a few beats to get there.
Right.
And there's other images they point to, but it culminates with that those frayed wires inside the Voyager probe itself. V'ger's broke the connection. Yes, just now. As Star Trek Discovery is, Star Trek the Motion Picture is all about connection. I mean, this commentary was filmed before was recorded before Discovery, but they say this movie, they called it a flawed masterpiece, but they said what they thought Robert Wise was trying to get out and bring out of all this was something about just the importance of connecting, with others. And I think that's true. And so that's really shaped my thinking on the movie a lot in the intervening years.
Well, I think it's very true, and I think it's very astute and correct. Something that my friend observed was that, and I think they may be quoting somebody else, was that
could be
as Kirk goes into the movie, as he starts out, he feels stiff and disjointed and disconnected, and then as McCoy comes in, and as Spock comes in, you see him really come to life. And start to get into his rhythm and become more himself. And that's very much true of the film and the character. And I think that's a great lesson to all of us, that we are not ourselves without each other.
Right.
American religion has got us thinking all very individualistically about our salvation, but it's a communal thing. We are the body of Christ, and we're all parts of one whole, and we work together and complement each other. That's the way we're intended to function. I mean, as human beings, right? I talk about us becoming better Christians and better humans as though those were separate things. They're not separate. They're one and the same. They had better be, or it's not worth being Christian. Right. So, that's something that we can sometimes lose, our dependence and our need for one another, and living in relationship, being vulnerable with one another, connecting with one another, because we're all on the same journey together. And we're here to help each other. We're here to live in community, and we become ourselves with each other, not just on our own. And that merging with that joining together with one another, I think primes us for and helps us to connect with the divine, because we connect with it not just at this there and then place, when we join with V'ger, right? Not just this future time when we connect with our Creator in this ultimate sense, but we also do so through one another. And that's really the best place we have to connect with God, is through one another. And that's an important thing to remember and to hold on to.
It just makes me wish so much that Leonard Nimoy had gotten his way for Spock's final line in the movie. Do you know this story?
No, I don't.
His final line as it stands is, Scotty offers to get him back to Vulcan in 4 days. He says, "Unnecessary, Mr. Scott. My task on Vulcan is complete." Right. And just last night, I read in Return to Tomorrow that Leonard Nimoy thought that line seemed very arbitrary. He didn't like it. And I've read elsewhere, and I don't know the source, it's been years, but what he had suggested was Spock's final line should be, "Unnecessary. If Dr. McCoy is to remain aboard, my presence here is essential." Which, of course, would have been perfect for the Spock-McCoy feuding throughout the series, but also would go to the point you've just made. It is essential that if you're going to be here, I got to be here too.
Yeah.
because I'm not myself without you. So It would have been a great character moment and funny and much better than what's there, in my opinion, but it also would have served a thematic purpose. It would have been kind of like a Lower Decks beat where it's funny, but you think about it a little bit, and it's really dead on.
Yeah. Well, and it would be a classic Spock moment too, of his using his logic and also a hint of arrogance as a cover for his love. That's what he does. When so many of the times, especially in the movies, when Spock says logic, what he really means is love. Yep. I really appreciate that about this film, and I think there's so much texture to it, and so much such a great rich character story, and such a beautiful moment in Star Trek history, just visually and just as an auditory experience. The score is so legendary. The look is so unique. Star Trek never looks like this again, except in a comic strip that was made, modeled after a motion picture, newspaper comic strip. And so it's just this unique, beautiful moment. It's one of the Star Trek's many rebirths and reimaginings. And, it's people say, oh, this was when they, changed Star Trek. And I'm like, man, pointing to some moment, the Kelvin timeline or whatever. And it's like, man, Star Trek has been changed and reimagined and rethought of so many times. And you know what? We have to do that in our own lives. We have to constantly reimagine ourselves, because we're always learning, changing, and growing. That's the project of being human. But it's just such a beautiful film. And I'm so glad that this renewed edition exists. It's a hopeful, beautiful thing.
Agreed.
So this has been wonderful and beautiful, and I think it is time now for our audience feedback.
Let's hear it.
Our feedback this episode comes from a listener, Thomas Gower, and he is talking about the fact that last episode we were saying, well, that's it for the Batman connections for Star Trek, I guess, in our Star Trek trivia section.
Yeah.
And he pointed out that there were two that we had forgotten. One of them is Yvonne Craig in the...
yes! How could we forget? It's Batgirl, for Pete's sake. Of course. And Marta. How could we forget?
Yep. In Whom Gods Destroy. Yep.
He's my lover. I have to kill him.
Right.
Oh.
And then also... in the episode, let's see if you remember it when I say it. In the episode That Which Survives, the hologram Larissa, played by Lee Merriweather. Yep. Still
Who was
wearing
another
her
Catwoman,
Yeah,
right?
still wearing her Catwoman eye makeup, it seems, in that role. I would say.
Well, when and if our trivia cards ask another question about which Batman star did this on Star Trek, Thomas Gower gets the golden self-sealing symbol.
That's right.
Very
that's
good.
Right.
Thank you, Thomas. You
Very
are
good.
absolutely 100% correct. Yeah.
Yep.
I can't believe, I mean, That Which Survives, I think, may have been the very first episode I ever saw.
Really?
A few years before I became a fan. I was up, I maybe have told this story before. I was up late sick one night as a kid in elementary school, and it was on a late night rerun. And I'm pretty sure it was that episode because that folding woman, makes an impression. But that I didn't remember Yvonne Craig, Batgirl,
Yep.
was as the only other Orion woman in the original series.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
Boy.
Amazing. Pretty cool.
Wow.
So you have an illness to thank. So you stayed up late watching that one
I stayed
TV
up late.
episode.
I had a fever, fever and an earache, and so I went downstairs to be on the couch. And my mom was up, and by late, of course, it was probably like only 10 o'clock or something.
Right, sure.
But when you're a kid, and now again, 10 o'clock can start to feel late. But yeah, but what stuck with me, this is the part I think I've told before, was I saw Spock standing by this at his science station, and there are those little square screens up there. I thought those were supposed to be windows, not view screens.
Yeah.
And they were talking about going warp speed, this, that, the other, and I said, "Ha ha! The stars are staying still." And I asked my mom about it, and she wasn't a Star Trek fan. She has never been. She wasn't really watching it. It was just background noise. She said, "Oh well, 1960s TV."
Right.
But yes, I'm pretty sure it didn't make me a fan, but I'm quite sure that was the very first episode I ever laid eyes on.
Well, you might not have been a fan at that first viewing, but you certainly were a nerdy nitpicker.
It was only a matter of time. Yes.
Right. That just shows you're gonna fall in love with Star Trek if you can look at it.
That's right.
It's the same with me saying, "Oh, those painted wooden blocks, that are supposed to be data tapes." Hey, that's how it starts. That's how it starts. You start with a little critique, a little thing that doesn't seem quite, and then they reel you in. That's how they get you.
They prove you care enough to pay attention.
That's right. That's right. You get the technology and the sci-fi, and then they just reel you in with that beautiful humanism, and you never leave. Oh man. Well, Thomas, thank you for pointing out that those criminally overlooked.
I know those are really there's no excuse for us forgetting those.
No excuse for us forgetting those. So very good. Thank you for that. And of course, we always appreciate all of the feedback that everyone sends in. Sometimes it sends us on philosophical conversations, and sometimes we're just nerds who don't know anything about Batman.
It just puts us in our place as well as
yes,
should.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh,
what did we say last episode? Confident and wrong.
Yes. Confident and wrong.
There you go.
Love it. Oh boy. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Mike, I want to know, what have we got coming up next episode?
Well, next time we'll be talking about episode 7 of season 2 of Star Trek Picard, title yet to be revealed.
I wish they would let us know some of these titles a little more in advance sometime. That'd be nice.
Well, it would only be polite.
It would. Don't they know we have a show to produce? Well, anyway, but still, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This season is going places I never expected, and we'll just see what happens next. And I hope all of you will join us for that, or at least for our next topical episode, if that's all you're listening to on the show. In the meantime, please like, comment, and share. And if you like what you're hearing, please write a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. Your reviews help more people find out about our show and let us know how we're doing.
Also, send us your feedback, just like Thomas did. You can find us at Gospel Trek Pod on both Twitter and Instagram, and The Gospel According to Star Trek on Facebook. Or you can email us at gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We really would love to discuss your feedback on the show.
And you can now support the show by subscribing. You'll get early access to each week's topical episode, plus outtakes and bonus content. Just click the subscribe button wherever you listen. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time,
I'm Mike Poteet.
And I'm Kevin Sinise. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper. See you next time.